In 1947, the decision was made by the United Nations to create the State of Israel in Palestine. The way Israel and Palestine were put together and torn apart at the same time. What they decided to do was create 8 zones. They were going to cut Palestine up into 8 pieces. 4 pieces would go to the Palestinians, 3 pieces would go to the Israelis, and 1 piece would become an international zone that was neither in Palestine nor in Israel. The Palestinians would end up with 48% of their state, even though the people who would become the Israelis only owned 5% of Palestine legally at the time. And the reason for this, of course, was because the world was feeling extraordinarily guilty about what had happened in the Holocaust. The United States, for example, at no point did anything to interrupt the Holocaust. We actually hindered the escape of Jews trying to get out of Europe under Nazi occupation. We hindered their escape, unless, of course, they knew things like political philosophy or how to make the nuke, or they had something useful for us. Otherwise, we stopped it. We never once bombed a railroad track heading to a concentration camp or a death camp. We never once bombed a concentration or death camp. And people say, well, we didn't know. How could we not know? We had broken the German codes. We knew everything they were doing. Why weren't we creating a single state that was secular, that made sure to protect the rights of Jews, Christians, and Muslims? 60 years, who cares? Time to move on. In 1956, to show that Israel wasn't just another Middle Eastern state, it joined France and Great Britain in a war against Egypt. One of the weird components about Israel is that there's a 3-tiered system, a 3-tiered caste system. If you're a European Jew, you're a first-class citizen. If you're an Arab Jew or you're a Sephardic Jew, you're a second-class citizen. And if you're Arab, you're third-class citizen. Israelis who play in the Euro Cup, the Israelis wanted to prove that they were Europeans. To the Arab, this doesn't look like the Jews coming home. They were already home. Jews always lived in the Middle East. This looks like another crusade. This looks like more European occupation. In 1967, Israel preemptively attacked Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. And in an amazing, stunning military victory, completely smashed all 3 states' militaries in 6 days. It was a complete drubbing. Egypt had 222 airplanes in its air force. Not a single airplane got up in the air. It set up the capture of Gaza. It set up the capture of the West Bank so that the so-called occupation would begin. When people talk about the occupation, what they're doing is they've surrendered the 78% of Palestine that went to the State of Israel, and they're saying just give the Palestinians 22% of what's left over. Just give them the last little itty-bitty bits. What's amazing about that is, since the occupation started in 1967, Israel has systematically been carving up Palestine into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. Now, the West Bank is approximately 11 little pieces that are disconnected from each other. What's left of the Palestinian state that the Palestinian Authority rules is 12% of the original territory of Palestine. The Gaza Strip is half the size of the city of Austin in land, but it's double the population. It's 4 times more densely populated than the city of Austin, making it one of the most, if not the most, densely populated place on the planet Earth. 80% of the population in the Gaza Strip had homes in Palestine. They still have the keys for them. They're still waiting to go home. It's a refugee camp, and a giant one at that. It's in effect a euphemism for concentration camp. And it's not merely the fact that this place was intensely bombed and buildings have been destroyed and UN aid relief material has been destroyed and fuel dumps have been destroyed, and that the Palestinians have been reduced to a barter economy, and that they have functionally only 3 hours a day to run out and grab a little bit of food, and that they run out of water and they don't have electricity. That's not the real tragedy. The real tragedy is that the world did nothing. You people here today are beautiful people. You've come out here to show your disgust with the fact that the United States spends $3.4 billion a year effectively not only enabling Israel to do these types of policies, but encouraging Israel to do these types of policies. It's not in Israel's best interest to make peace. As long as they can sustain war, they can make all sorts of money from us. Think about this. 18 Israelis have died by rocket strikes since 2000. That's a tragedy. But when you divide $3.4 billion by 18, you realize that per person, they're making mega profit on their own tragedy.
That's right.
We need to stop the United States simply, blindly, without conditions, supplying Israel with money without considering the human rights ramifications. We actually have a law on the books that don't allow this. This is actually technically against the law. If a country commits an act of terrorism, by law, the United States of America is not allowed to send them weapons, sell them weapons, or send them aid to buy weapons.
Because